Imagine with me for a minute a tale of science with a touch of fiction. There's a group of scientists who are working on a space program to send a probe the size of a USB drive attached to a light sail powered by a laser array off to our closest solar system neighbor, Alpha Centauri. It's 4.5 light years away, give or take. And if that light sail travels at 1/5 of the speed of light, which they believe it can get there in 20 years. They're ready to launch that in about 20 years. So in 40 years' time, we could have a probe created by humans in our closest solar system neighbor. Now think about how far those mobile devices that we carry, some of us, carry in our pockets, how far they've come in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, the technology packed into your cell phone would probably fill this red mat. So let's imagine what it could be like 40 years from now. We miniaturize more of that technology. We look at what we have at hand today. 3D printers, quantum computing, robotics, artificial intelligence, brain-machine interfaces. And we put that all together into a little mini probe that we send off to Proxima Centauri b, potentially habitable for humans. And while we're there, we have those little probes, print some more probes, they start to self-replicate. Before we know it, we're beaming our consciousness there and back and living out our intergalactic futures in vivid technicolor via virtual reality in our lifetimes. This is possible. Cool story, right? That's the benefit of science fiction. We can take things that are in the future with a little bit of technology and help it frame the problems we have in society today. One of the biggest we have is power. So this could be a dystopian tale, or it could be a utopian tale. The best science fiction is something in the middle. Imagine a magnet. On the one side, you have the positive. On the other side, you have the negative. And if it's seesawing between the two, at some point you find balance in the middle. That moment of balance is the average, what mathematicians call the mean. I like to call that balancing act meaning. And that's what we're looking for. So in this interconnected world where we're dealing with power dynamics, what does it mean to be human when we're not the center of that epic dance? Let's look at what it means to be human-centered with design. We're going to unpack a couple of things about being in the center as a human. It's kind of problematic. So I'd like to propose something that looks at what comes next. What else? What other options? What comes post-human-centered design? Post-human-centered design. So let's unpack that a little bit. Let's start with what I mean by design. Design is not about color palettes and fonts and logos and grids and the things we buy and the things we sell and the things we wear and the things we drive. Design is about the practice of shaping how a thing exists in the world, how it fits into our spaces, our lives, and our experiences. As Johnny Ive from Apple, ex-Apple, says, design is about the space an object occupies in our minds. Design is about the space, the environment, the ecosystems, and how we relate to that. Human-centered is derived from humanism. Humanism became popular at around the time of the Renaissance. The idea around humanism was to remove the influence of power from the gods and empower humans, which was wonderful. If you were white, male, wealthy, and Eurocentric. The problem with that is that we've come to recognize that in today's world, humanism shows us that some humans are more human than others. That's problematic because the people in charge, the white men in Silicon Valley with venture capital money that are driving this technological evolution that they're pushing as an agenda and calling posthumanism leads us away from the liberation of the fear of volcano gods into techno-optimism, which is great. We should all be optimistic about technology. There's some really amazing positives that can come from technology. But on the other hand, we have the downsides. Effective accelerationism, as one camp calls it, where basically the idea is to let capitalism run its course, let technology run its course, unfettered, unregulated, to the inevitable societal collapse, because something better will come from that, surely. Well, I don't know so much. What that would lead to is more climate change denialism, the enshittification of platforms. It's a real term. And more enslavement and exploitation of resources, be they planetary, natural, or human. So coming back to the story about space travel, why would we want to encourage billionaires to go and colonize the moon, or Mars, or Alpha Centauri? This was the same kind of conversation that happened around the 60s, when a lot of money and funding was going towards the moon missions. The benefits we got out of that: freeze-dried food, CAT scans, integrated circuits, which are very important for technology. And for me, perhaps, the most important, the overview effect. This is a profound moment of awakening described by astronauts, where they can look down at the pale blue dot, spaceship Earth, and not see it as people, individuals, things, problems, but interconnected systems in one larger ecosystem. This interconnectedness is what brings me to philosophical posthumanism, the other side. Posthumanism looks at moving past the humanist limitations of power and representation. It's an opportunity to question what has gone wrong, what has gone right, and what can we build on going forward, understanding that no two perspectives on anything contain an absolute truth. I see things differently to how you see them, but there's a relationship. Philosophical posthumanism looks at all things, all humans, as being in relation to all other things. The philosopher Donna Haraway introduces the concept of the cyborg not as a human-machine combination, but rather the blurring of boundaries between animals and humans, nature and culture, biology and technology. This idea of cyborgs gives us an interesting consideration towards the coexistence with non-human things. And when I say non-human, I'm talking about pets, plants, planets, and AI chatbots. We're in an existential dance with humans and non-human agents. And this requires a broader, bigger understanding, a more than human perspective to create something meaningful going forward. So this flattened landscape allows us to understand that all things are connected, are interconnected. We're neither the be-all, nor the end-all, nor the top of the apex. We're not the center anymore. We're all connected. Everything is accountable and accounts for in a relational, consensual, and considerate way to other things. So how do we put this into practice? I mean, it sounds cool. That's great. Like, awesome. Humanism, like, bad thing. Posthumanism, cool. How do I do that? There are a couple of practical steps. As a designer, we have human-centric design, which gives us 5 different questions that we can ask, and the same is true for post-human-centered design. First, I start off by going, what am I? And what is that? We've established we need a relationship. So what is that? I could be a mobile phone, and that could be a network tower, and there's an interaction there. For the purposes of this, I'm going to say, I am a husband. What is that? That is my wife. What is our relationship? We're married. What can we do? We can have a meaningful relationship in our family. That then feeds into our ecosystem, our first ecosystem, our family dynamic. And from that, we can raise a confident daughter. And our daughter then goes on to influence the next ecosystem. That ecosystem is our school, then our community, then our city, then our country, then our planet, then our intergalactic consciousness. The final step, and for me, the most important step as a post-human-centered designer, is to then swap the first relationship. Because if we're looking at the positive and the negative and we're trying to find the balance, I need to understand my wife's perspective in order to design a meaningful relationship. So understanding that from a relational point of view, let's look at ecosystems. Potentially the best example of that is our planet. It's one big ecosystem. We learned that from the overview effect. So let's look at the narrative around sustainability and how do we design a better post-human-centered narrative for sustainability. We go through all of the understandings from a humanist point of view that the planet is ours. It's a resource. We harvest, we mine, we change, we do, we terraform, we live our best lives, and the planet, well, it's not looking so good at the moment, so hey, let's try and do some things that can help sustain it. That's the problem. And by swapping it, we can understand that we're not here to sustain the planet. We are part of the planet. And therefore, the planet is sustaining us. And that's a very different narrative to start constructing. Rather than looking at, we need to save the planet, we need to understand the planet was here before we were. The planet will be fine once we're gone. The planet sustains us. And that relationship and that dynamic changes and becomes post-human. When we take into consideration what we can do and the power dynamics we can shift, we need to look at how we create nature, technology, and people as a unified, meaningful system. What that means is we could create little probes that self-replicate. Heck, we could even self-replicate. We could start printing synthetic biology. We could utilize networks that communicate at the speed of light and live out our virtual relationships in VR, Technicolor, right here on this planet, and there if we chose to. And we can do that in our lifetimes. Coming back to Donna Haraway, she proposes that humans, dogs, nature, culture, technology are all interlinked. We're all interconnected. We're all kin. We're all family. Kinship, kindredness. It's a form of kindness. Talking about synchronicities and being in relation with the environment around us. A couple of nights ago, my wife and I were watching a film. There's a quote from that film that's quite profound because it speaks directly to what I've been talking about tonight. Nothing beats kindness. It sits quietly beyond all things. We're already collectively part of a system that makes us more than human. So let's design for post-human outcomes. Let's empower all humans, nature, cultures, and technologies, because we already live here. Thank you.